So hi, welcome to Digital Live Session 1, Media Design Basics, the Working Environment. And this session, we are going to do a basic overview of color principles, which include light and perception of light, video basics with camera options, and kind of intro to design principles. Taking into consideration, we're talking about live integration of media. So I'm going to focus more on theatrical elements. Then we're going to go into cables, adapters, hardwares, things that are just like make things work, and how to scale those things according to the environment that you choose to be in. Then intro to media servers. Media servers are something like Isadora, or you could even use OBS if you want a free version, and Touch Designer is another one. And then some video examples, we'll look at some video examples of, I think, what effective design looks like, maybe in a theater and maybe for screen and maybe on a gallery. We'll look at all the spectrum of that. And then just kind of overview of the role of a media designer in theater. I kind of attribute it to akin to the technical, theater artisan team, where they're just, they work together with the sound designer and the lighting designer and that kind of role, but then also looking at it from another perspective of an artist that wants to create with media, but not necessarily is going to do the technical work. So like just switch that a couple times to better understand roles. And yeah, I think that's pretty much it. And if we want to go down any rabbit holes, I have Caitlin and I have Riley here who will help me direct that if they have any questions. Okay. So first off, I just want to go down the rabbit hole of basic color principles. And I've done some practical experiments as well as, theoretical research in physics and light and stuff, but I'm by no means a scientist or expert in any of this. It's just basically things that help you figure out the basic principles that are building blocks of the environment we're working in. And if we let's look at first our own bodies and how humans perceive light and perceive color. And basically, and I think I shut that thing off, but let's go into, there's my cheat sheet. So our eyes are made of cones and rods, right? Well, made of different things, but basically to perceive color and light, we have cones and rods. And in the cones, we have 3 cones, one that filters red, one that filters green, and one that filters blue. And so if you look at colorblind people, they have a difference in either 1 or 2 of those cones so that they don't see certain colors, like they don't see red or they don't see green and they don't see blue. And that's why some people can see only between the green and the blue spectrum, and some only can see the red and the green spectrum. So basically, the principles of that, the RGB, gets transferred into video because the 3 elements, the 3 colors that make up light that we use in the video are red, green, and blue. So we're basing our technology off of our human makeup. If we look at other animals, they have different, like the mantis shrimp is, the mantis shrimp has the most advanced color perception in the animal kingdom. They have, is it like 12? Yeah, 12 channels of color. So we have 3, they have 12, and they can detect UV, ultraviolet light, polarized light, and I think infrared. I'm pretty sure that they can perceive infrared as well. And also can access light that we can't. Sometimes this kind of animal perception is actually useful to humans because we develop technology that kind of can replicate that super power that they have that we don't. Like for satellite systems, I think they use some of this kind of like, well, if the mantis shrimp does this, then like, how do we make this little machine that can do the same thing and that will give us kind of the superpower vision of a mantis shrimp, which is kind of cool in some ways. So in humans, it's like, I think there was something that said 30 million years ago, humans could perceive ultraviolet light. And as evolution progressed, we lost that ability to perceive ultraviolet light for whatever reason. And in that evolution as well, like you have, you know, color perception of like which colors are more dominant in our perception, and you know, what came first, like what color in the evolution of the humans, what came first? And the first color that we ever saw was red. We didn't see anything else. We just saw red. Red was a color, and it was for survival, because red is like the color of blood, the color of danger. If you think of red and the associations of color red, it's very useful because then you won't die. It's like the first thing. And then I think there was other colors, and I think the last color we started to perceive was blue. And I can't remember exactly why that was, but if you look through also like art, like how art was actually formed, like there was, you know, perception of color, but also pigments, and they could get the pigments from different places. And blue and purple were like the most rare things. So they couldn't even paint with that until they found, you know, the pigments to do that. Anyway, so let's go back to, so you have 3 cones in your eyes, red, green, and blue. And if they're working correctly, you can see color. There's also tetrachromats, which are humans that have 4 rods. And I can't remember what the 4th one is, but it's like they could see a broader gamut in their color perception. So they can see the difference between 2 shades of blue that normal trichromat people can't see. So that it's like very kind of, I think it just like slices it in smaller chunks so that they can see it better. And so in addition to cones, we have rods, and that dictates the light and the dark in the room. So when you're in a dark room, if you notice, you kind of see monochromatic. You don't see a lot of color because those cones are less light sensitive to your perception of color. So you're just seeing kind of black and white-ish. And then as the light kind of fills it in, you're seeing more of the vibrant colors. And you can see that with a camera too. Like if you take a camera in a dark room, it really can't see much of this grainy stuff. And then like you put the light in, then it sees more like vibrant. So let's look at, in terms of our visible light spectrum, let's look at the color spectrum and the frequencies that are contained in that. We hope you can see this. Tell me if you can see this. Can you see that?
Yep.
Yes. And I can't. So that's great. I can see it on the wall, so I'm going to cheat. I'm going to look at the wall. Or look at my paper. I have my paper. So if you look at the visible light spectrum, you go from violet to the left and then all the way to the red to the right. And if you notice right away, there are certain ranges that are like bigger and certain ranges that are smaller. So the largest in that spectrum is red, which has something like a value of 80 terahertz range. So we could see many shades of red and there's a lot of it, right? Also, the next one is violet, which is 750 to 675 terahertz, which has a range of 75 terahertz. Just second, you know, most dominant color. And then we have green, which has a value of like 65-ish, the range of 65 terahertz. And then you go into orange, which is like 50, and then indigo, which is 45, blue, which is 40, and then yellow, which is the smallest, and it's only 15. So if you look at the difference between red, our perception of red is 80, and yellow, which is 15, it's like kind of a major difference. And if you're ever doing like, you have a camera and you try to adjust the color in like very small increments, you have a lot of play with the red, right? You don't have so much play with yellow. As soon as you go a little bit, it goes to orange, and then you go a little bit, it goes to green. You're like, like there's this very fine tuning when you come to a smaller light spectrum. So, just take that into consideration when choosing color, I guess, for any element. If you really need to color match and be really specific, maybe go with more of a red color, so then you can just fine tune it ever so slightly to the correct one. So that's kind of it for like the science of color. There's so many more pathways you can take down those roads. I had so much fun just doing like 1 hour YouTube videos on the theory and the physics of color. I would welcome you to do that, because it just kind of opens your mind up to like, this is like kind of interesting and applicable to when you're dealing with video. Just because, as I said before, that the technology is only an extension of our own perception, right? It's not based off of anything else until you get into the more scientific realm and other things. But like, just basically, if you're doing a movie or you're doing something that people can see, you're basing it off the color perception that we already have into our bodies and expressed outward. So there's that. I don't know if I want to go down the road of like, let me show you something else. Oh, I have to move you guys over so I can see. Let me show you a couple of things. Let's look at this. So this, can you see this? It's blurry, but it's not a very good resolution image.
Okay. I was like, let me put my glasses back on.
No, it's totally blurry. It's totally not. But the importance is looking at the triangle. And this is a color gamut, right? And this is a color gamut for like a HD TV, 4K, like some sort of, So if you perceive our color gamut as larger than this is for HD TV. So this is the colors that are represented in the 4K, I don't know, Sony display. And the triangle, I think, represents the colors we can actually duplicate via our cameras, right? But if you think of it even smaller than that, like think of the larger one as our visible light spectrum, which is bigger than this, right? And then you condense, you kind of crunch it more, and then you can be like, well, this is what's available in our displays. And then you crunch it more and like, this is what's available right now in our technology of cameras. And so you have to kind of like understand that sometimes what you're going to get from your input, which is your camera, is not going to display correctly on the output, which is your projector or your display, your monitor or someone else's TV set, just because depending on our devices, we have a different gamut that is able to be represented in those devices. So like I said, with the yellow, like I can give you an example. I had a logo that I made like 10 years ago. And I love the color cyan. Like it's my favorite color to use for logos because it's blue, but it's not blue, it's a little green. Gives people like a sense of like calmness, but it's not too calm to be like, heavy. It's like a little bright at the same time. Trying to duplicate that color was a pain in the butt over multiple mediums. Like if you tried to print it, it would have one shade. If you tried to put it on a screen, it would have another shade. So for that, I had to use, if you're familiar with Pantone color matching strips, I'm not sure. I have a book and you kind of like open it up and you're like, I want that color. And this is color 4165. in printing. And then so if we tell the printer to use that ink, it's going to match that. You can also take the 4165 and look it up on their Pantone matching site. It'll give you the hex values of it. And then you put in the hex values and you hope and pray that like it's the best you can do at the moment. I also tried to do a logo with like, it's kind of like this between orange and red. So that is horrible colors like gamut to be playing with because it will either be orange or red. It will never be like exactly that kind of intermediary color, just because of our devices and their limitations, and the fact that yellow is the smallest, you know, of the in the color light spectrum that we can perceive, right? So also representing that is going to be harder too. So it's like a little bit of story about that. So let's go into the colors and the mixing of colors and like principle of color, you know, in the additive color spectrum. So here are 3 circles. And when you red, green, and blue, so you have green on the left, red in the center, and blue on the right. And so when you mix all 3 colors together, you get, in theory, white, right? So if you look at the center sliver, it's all the colors overlapping, and you get this white. So when you mix green and red together, you get yellow. When you mix red and blue together, you get magenta. Did I not? When you mix green and, I did not do the triad thing. Let me do it. There we go. So when you mix green and blue together, you get cyan. So if you notice that, you know, you have the 3 additive colors, right? When you mix them together, you get different shades. And then when you mix 2 of them together, you get the secondary, what do you call those? Secondary colors. This is different than painting, right? So when you're painting, you use red, yellow, and blue. You're going to get a different shade depending on, you know, like your pigments, but it's different than light mixing in some ways. And it's, you know, if you've been taught that color principles are red, blue, and yellow, and you're expecting a certain result in light, you're going to, you know, you might get a different thing. So just kind of like introducing this model of color mixing, because this is the one that we see. This is one that's represented in cameras, and it's represented in screens and displays as well. So the painting one, it doesn't really apply so much. It's like, this is your model that you're going to be using. Now, so let me stop rambling for a second. Do you guys have any thoughts or questions about all of that so far?
This is great so far. I'm loving it. I'm not
Okay. Okay, cool. Just making sure. I just like talking is a lot. So is there anything else you guys are curious about, like in terms of light, that hasn't been touched on yet that you're aware of, I guess?
Something that you mentioned briefly of like, oh, when you're in a dark space, you can't see the color. And then as you add light, you can start seeing color.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I am constantly battling with wanting to see a lot of color and also not wanting to wash out the color. Is there any kind of like graph or visual of like when you start losing color when you add too much light, or is it just depending contextually on where you are?
It depends also on, if you look at this color model, right?
Mm-hmm.
The colors you're using.
Right.
Right. So additive, you know, color, let me see. I'm going to do a party trick for you guys, and I'll just make it up on the spot. Because I think I call it a party trick. When I taught 4th graders, they loved this. This was their favorite thing in the world. So we have, is this the right one? Kinda. We can use this one. So right now we have a visual representation of a body moving in space, although she'll get in the light in a minute. And this is all channels, right? This is red, green, and blue mixed together, and you get this figure. Now what I'm going to do, should have done this before, and I should make you see this, but that's fine. You can talk and do this at the same time, I think. What I'm going to do is I'm going to separate out a layer of red, a layer of blue, and a layer of green. And I'm going to separate them out so you can see them in as it is in time, basically. Just give me a moment because I have to do this. Do it really quickly, it's almost done. So we have a layer. Oops, shut this off, turn this on. This is the red layer, okay?
Mm-hmm.
This is a little bit, you know, delayed so you can see it. This is added, the green layer. And here's added the blue layer. If we stop the video, let's see, stop the video. Oh shoot, can't do that. Well, there's no stillness in this video. I wish there was a stillness in the video, you could see it better. But all of those three colors, you know, they're blending really well together because you're separating out the three colors. And when they're mixing together, so the red and the blue, you can also pick another video that's probably better. Okay, this is a little better. So you have three bodies moving in space, and when they overlap, they create different colors, right? But they're not washing each other out yet until the dancer is, if you look at the leg, is starting to be still. And that's when the colors are starting to like overlap and combine. So if you're doing, you know, I don't know, layering or even like choosing your colors, knowing that you have red, green, blue as your basic principal, you know, colors, it might help you with the washing out thing. Does that make sense? Yeah. Understanding this, the like why they're separated.
Mm-hmm.
We should have had a live video because then I could show you why. But she's not going to stay still, I swear to God.
So if there was like a totally dark room and then they gradually brought the light up, like what would be the first colors that you'd see?
Depending on your light source. I'll get to that in a minute. It's like you're layering so many different elements of technology. So I tend to just do a very basic side light or wash of neutral colored light, because if I start to play with that light, then that's adding another layer of complexity to the composition. So sometimes I can't deal with it. So I'm just like, white light, that's it. We're not going to do any other color than white light. But just knowing that it does add that other layer, because you're like, the first layer is, you know, you see light and then you're putting it through a camera and then you're processing it and then you're bringing it back out through light to see it. There's already there's a lot of processes in that. Even if it's just that straight camera to display without processing. But it's still processing inherently, but no effects or anything like that. I wish I had better. Let's see what this video does. This might work. Yep, this will work. So if you saw that red, green, blue, and then you see what, you know, this is the representation of that. I can go into like feedback, you know, the discussion of feedback, but I think that maybe is too far down that rabbit hole. And I kind of wish like the video synth people, I've never touched one of those devices, but I feel like you're using some basic principles in order to mix the stuff. I think it's super useful to understand that. Like, you know, patching the wires and controlling all of the things that could be a useful exploration if one is so inclined. And like old technology also is much more integrated with the basic principles than now we have digital technology, which it kind of extracts it. It makes it a little bit, you know, more abstract than the actual 3 wires. Let me show you that you would have. So, you know, this stuff. Let me stop sharing the screen so you can see this. Find it. Stop sharing. Where's the button? Okay. So if you have this, can you see that? This is a capture device. This is for taking a camera and sticking it in there. You have these, you know, these ones, which, you know, you probably are familiar with in the back of an old TV set or even a current TV set. Not so much in the current ones. I just bought a TV and they didn't have any. I was kind of disappointed. I was like, I want those ABs cables. But then you have these guys, green, blue, red, and those are the color channels that are separated in cables. And that's how it used to work, you know. But now we have a USB or we have, you know, a HDMI, and you're not, you know, touching that stuff anymore. So that concept is kind of like abstracted for us just because of the evolution of technology. But it is based in the same principle. It's just digitized instead, which is based off of our perception of color. So yeah. There's so let's go in. I'm going to jump a little bit, and I want to go into an introduction of composition and design as it relates to different platforms or environments, right? So the first one, as performers, we are, maybe it makes more sense to go into that first, is you're in a theater, okay? And you want to incorporate some sort of digital media, i.e. projection, could be it, into your work. And I tend to like to think about it like almost like a lighting designer, although it took me like 5 years to figure this out. So I'm just going to give you a shortcut. You're in a dark space, and lighting designers tend to start with a dark space because that will give them a blank canvas. So you have this blank canvas of dark space, and then you add the element into the space. So let's just do this as a, let me shut that off. As an exercise. So we have dark space, which I hope you can see as a dark space, right? A lighting designer, we have this ball here. And a lighting designer would go ahead and like, all right, let's figure out how to light this ball, which is our object or our subject on stage. And so they would go, all right, well, what does front light do? You know, what does side light do here, right? What does top light do? Although we don't have so much shadow because it's a ball, it's a sphere. And then what does this light do? Right. So those are basically, I have this white object. I have this basically bright white light. Can you see the sphere, by the way?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I don't know. I can't see anything. So like where we point that light is going to dictate how we perceive that object. Cool. So imagine this is our, well, this was, now it's our performer right now. It's our performer. And like all my blacks are actually in the canal space. So I had to use brown. This little light. I didn't even have any black left. It was crazy. So imagine this is black because I'm trying to get it to go away and simulate a theater. You know, when the light hits the black, it's a less reflective surface than the white. And so it it's mellowed as compared to the white surface. Cool. All right. So if we have this white ball as, say, our surface, now it's changed its role from a surface, from a performer to now a surface. And we wanted to add, if we wanted to add something to it, you know, I have a projector here. I don't know what you see, I have no idea. Okay. So now we have this surface where I've concentrated the light and directed the light onto the surface, and there's no spill onto the background. Like the kitty cat. Yeah. Can you see? Yeah, you can see that. Cool. See better now. There we go. So can you see that, like, more or less, that the glowing orb?
Yep.
Right. So that's very basic because it's like a white surface. We're projecting light onto it, and it's very easy. It's an easy thing to do because the white's not going to give you any problems. It's going to totally reflect the light. You're going to have some clarity. But what would happen? Whoops. What would happen if we introduced, you know, like another thing to this? I don't even know if this is going to work because I did not try it, but we can attempt. There's glass involved. Who knows? Right. So now we have a scrim-like surface, and now our ball is now our performer again. Okay. So cool. So what happens? Oh, and you can't see because it's not directly on there. Is that even perceivable? I don't even know. There we go. That's even better. So you can kind of see it, but not really, in the black fabric, just because we have too much light in the room and the content is not the very best right now. Let me rewind that. Let's make it number 1. So now we have like object in the background, scrim in the front foreground, and we have a different color surface. This works kind of, it's not the best example in the world, but because we've keyed out all the unnecessary design elements and created the circle. And we've lit the performer in the background so that you can see them and see the projection layer in the front foreground. Yeah. This is better. Okay. Turn up the light. Right. So the interaction in live space with light. Now I'm going to show you something that is like, well, this is different. And volume. Okay. So here's like some cool birds, right? But your content is now just spilling out in the background. It's very light. There's no black. The only black is the birds. And your object that you're projecting on is white. So it takes the eye off of what you want it to look at, because you're just overwhelming it
Is there text on there? I can only see a white.
Yeah, it's the clouds.
Yeah.
There's
like a
some
white
birds. Yeah, let me see what kind of thing you're seeing. Oh yeah, you really can't see anything, huh?
But for example, like why is that
Right.
happening? You know, like why? Because we know I'm familiar with that thing happening where like, you know, well, I can't see what you're seeing, but why does that happen? You know what I mean?
What do you mean? Like, why does it look like a big white square?
Yeah. Like why can't we see whatever you're seeing?
Because my camera's trying to be smart. It's trying to auto adjust in the light for this. I should have brought my other DSLR down, but I did not, because I was trying to be more mobile with it, and Zoom does not allow me to have any control over that, I don't think. Unfortunately, oh, maybe I can. Video. No, I don't want to adjust for low light. I want it to like not adjust for low light. Post-processing. No, it looks like it's like totally baked in and I can't. What I could do, this is good to know. That makes it worse. Yeah, it's my camera. It's being stupid. I can maybe even check, see if the other camera's better. Nope. I'll just bring up the contrast in the actual footage so then you can probably see it a little better. Okay, can you see that better now? It's blue with like a little bit more clear. It's not just white washed out.
Yeah.
So
Blue?
what?
Is it blue for you all the time?
It's blue now. I just increased the contrast of the actual footage that's being projected, so then the camera doesn't try to like do some weird thing with it.
I keep that now.
Yeah, it's being smart but stupid at the same time. Because in normal circumstances, yeah, you would want to see, but I want you to see the differences. So if you were to go into a theater and that ball was your projection surface and you threw at it the whole frame of the projection, it would maybe not be your friend in terms of a design element that would be useful or effective, right? So using black as your base and then adding light to it as you go, it yields, I think, a more impactful design and a more conscious design choice, if that makes sense.
Black is more like, it's more of a blank canvas because you're adding light, whereas like a white surface is like already all the light.
Yeah, and then what are you going to do with that? It's like you can't really do much with that. And yes, our surface is white. Our surface is white, but you're throwing light at it. And this is why, you have the standard for dance, at least and in theater and in opera, the standard is, let's just put a big white cyc in the back of the performers and let's throw some light at it to put some projection on it. I'm not saying that's wrong. I'm just saying that I feel as though it's become an unconscious standard, which already draws the eye to the big white sheet in the back, right? So you have this 40-foot tall sheet by like whatever, how big of a theater you're in, depending, this big white thing. And then you stick this little human in front of it, and it already, even without putting any light on it, detracts the eye from the human to the big white thing in the back. I'm a big fan of using a black scrim because it is the black canvas that you're playing with. And unfortunately, my scrim is just like, my black fabric's not here, and I have, you know, this scrim, again, it doesn't bounce the light so much. And when you don't have projection, it goes away. In white surfaces, when you don't have projection, it doesn't go away. It's still there in your eye, kind of just blaring. And especially on large theater stages, it's just, it's like, it's dominant. It's dominant. And
And
if
it can look so dirty too. If there's any like little bit of dust on it, you can see it.
yeah, and you can see it, and it's like, and that's why I think Stephen Petrilli says, he's like, his quote that he always says to me is like, if you have a show that incorporates projection, the show is about projection. And I think it's because of this experience of having this big white sheet in the background. And lighting designers, you know, like they prefer not to. They prefer to control that light with the black canvas. You throw the light into the space, and if you do that with a human, like you stick the human there in the black space, you can't see them. You throw the light to the side, and all of a sudden, all you see is that human. You don't see the black. You don't see all the things behind it. If you had a white thing behind it, you already see the white. You throw the light in, light bounces off everywhere, and then tracks the eye. Your cat. Yeah, distract the eye. Cue Riley.
All right.
Cat.
White scrims, fuck them, you know?
I'm not saying they're bad. I'll show you some examples that actually make good use of them. But just know that the white is like, it's the combination of all color, and it's going to be the dominant thing that you're going to see.
Are white, with the white scrim in the back, are they typically, so like if I had to choose between a white scrim or a white sort of fabric that had some sheen to it, that already had a little bit of like shininess, that light balance to it versus like a matte white, like which is sort of, what's going to do what, you know, if you project
with the projector?
Yeah, if you're projecting onto sheen versus matte, like what's the?
I can kind of, yeah, I can answer that. Even if it's not white, there's something to say. So when the light hits, you have to take into account refraction.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're shining light at something and it's bouncing the light in a linear way that's like angled, you're gonna get that shimmer with your image, and it might not be the most clear image, but it will have this. I have this, and it's downstairs in the basement. I did not bring it up. This scrim I use, which is black, and it's kind of meant for this, I think. It's a very tight weave, and it's just like slightly shimmery threads that make it. It's not cotton. It's some sort of synthetic. And when I shine light on it, it gives it kind of like this holographic shimmer. And I particularly like that. Plus the weave is super close. So the definition of the image is going to be really nice. Right? And you can see through it. So if I shine light on the performer that's in back of it, you can also see the performer really clearly as well. Whereas like a shark's tooth scrim, the weave is a little bit wider. It's cotton for the most part, like something that's very matte. It does really good jobs, but you have to have a higher lumen projector to get a brighter image because nothing is being refracted. The light's not being refracted off of it. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like what's better or not. I think it depends on a couple of things. One is the lumens of your projector, making sure that in the aesthetic that you're looking for, if you want it to be, you know, with the matte, it's going to have a much flatter appearance than it is when you have like the more shimmery reflective surface.
And the tighter the weave, then the less that the light's going to be going through the material, which means it's going to be more crisp.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. And also you just have to, you know, I have bought so many little, I'm going to turn the light on so you can see better. I've bought so many of like these samples from Rose Brand. Like this is a black. This is what they're. This is Shark's Tooth, I think. Yeah, this is Shark's Tooth basic black scrim. I don't know if you can see. So you can see through it, right? But the weave's like super big. But does it matter on a proscenium stage? Maybe not, because they're far away. Your audience is far away. They can't see. Like they're not going to be able to need to see the details because they're too far away to see it anyways. Mine as well. And this is standard in the theater. They already had this. Most theaters do anyway. This is just the blackout stuff. Mostly duvetine and stuff like that. I had another little box that had a whole bunch of different ones. Yeah. So surfaces, I think, what I would suggest to just understand and kind of bring into the consciousness is that if you're going to design or you're going to have a person design for you, any kind of media integration, explore the surface options that you might have.
I'm listening.
Yeah, I know. It's okay. And don't just take for granted that, we're just going to use a white screen in the back. Maybe that's all that they have in the theater, but, you can also use it wisely. Whereas, like, if you had, like, the white, maybe something. Do I have a flat something white? No. We can use the ball, I guess. Yes. So if you have a ball that's white, imagine that sphere as like imagine the sphere as a white background, right? You just throw light at it and that's what will happen. Or quickly make a square. You have an element. Design element. We're going to call it a square for now. I'm going to make it smaller. Tiny square. Okay. Can you see the tiny square?
Yeah.
Yeah, cool. So you take the tiny square, and now you have a white thing, but we can move that tiny square in the space as a design element, like as we want to. And I think that's more effective design because you're concentrating the focus on the element that's actually important. Even if you're using a white thing in the back, right? Even if you have to use the white thing in the back, you're now deciding which part of that white thing we want to draw the eye to. Instead of just doing what we just did with like the birds. Oops, where are the birds? Those birds? Nope. The birds, where you're just blasting the whole thing, and now you have no choice as to where we're gonna look. We're just gonna look at the whole thing, and that's it, and that's what you get. Yeah. I think that's my spiel on that. It's like basic design principles. Okay. Any questions or thoughts about that?
I kind of have a question.
Yeah.
If you're using a black scrim and you want to put projection onto the black scrim, do you need to have like a especially strong projector in order to be able to see it on the black scrim as opposed to a white?
Yeah. So nice segue to the next component.
Great.
This is like, how did you know where I was going to go with this?
Wonderful.
So I can't do this in my kitchen, so I can just talk about it, I guess. Well, I mean, if you look at what I have here, oops, right now, I have this little Pico projector. It's my friend because this is what I use like in my kitchen because it's a small theater. My kitchen is now a small theater. So proximity between this and my thing, it's not very big. I don't need much light to shine out of it, just because we're really close. And when you get further away with this, the light diminishes. To to, you know, like diminishes and like eventually just fades out. So all the equipment is like this super big rabbit hole of how much lumens you need in your projector in order to get the effect that you want from it. And lumens can range from anywhere from like 100, which is the really cheap, like Amazon, like pocket projectors, to 50,000 lumens or something like that, where you would project onto a building like that, right? And all of it's related to proximity, where your projector is in space. There are standard throw projectors, which are an aspect ratio, a throw ratio of 1:1, which means that for every foot of distance, you will get 1 foot of width from the projector. I think this is basically a 1:1. Yeah, have a seat. And a little lifting. So the bird's up. So.
What was that called, Kelly? What ratio?
Throw ratio.
Ratio.
Yeah. So if you look here, you know, I'm really close. I'm going to get a really small image because of the, what is it, the rule of, I forget the name of it. Because light's like a cone, basically shining. You know, it goes small when you get smaller, and it gets wider as you go back. So it depends on how big, how close you are to your surface. It really dictates of how much lumens you need from this and what your surface is. There are a whole bunch of formulas. I had to do this once for a brick surface. So if I wanted to project onto a building, there's a calculation that you can do according to how much light absorbency the surface has versus how much light you're throwing at it. You can do that calculation if you can't get to your site, which is like a building and you have a one-stop, like you have to do it and that's it. Like there's no testing this out. So you'd have to do the calculation. In a theater, you still kind of have to do that calculation, but it's more controlled. So, and there's more standards in a theater than there are like in a building, you know, from the back of a truck with like a battery or something. So to answer your question, Caitlin, it's like it's kind of complicated in some ways. And in a lot of theaters, they have a projector already mounted in a certain place, either from the back of the house, and they have like a long throw lens. So it narrows the beam of light. So then by the time it reaches your surface, it doesn't lose as much. There's also, like when I did my performance in the VCA black box, I had 3 short throw projectors hung, and they were only about 10, oh, that's wrong, 15, 12 feet. They were only about 12 feet from the surface that they were going to hit. And what a short throw lens does is it opens it up, right? So at a short distance, you're going to get a big image versus a long throw lens. You're at a short distance, you're going to get a small image, and a long distance, you're going to get a normal size image. So did that kind of answer, but not answer your question?
Yeah, I think that kind of answers my question. It is it like one like formula that you just like plug and play each little thing, like whatever's on the back of your box of the camera, and then like whatever's on the back of the box of the scrim, and you okay.
Yeah, there's tests that you can do using a special tool, and I can't remember the name of it. Shoot, it measures light from a distance of a surface. Like it just measures it. It's a tool. You just have to get the tool to figure that out. I've never got that tool. I just assume that like you go to projectorcentral.com. I'll show you. It's like they have a cool little tool. I think they have throw calculator. It's called a throw calculator. And you plug in, search by projector. I'll do an Epson, whatever. It doesn't even matter at this point. Search. I'm going to show you this in a minute. They revamped it. Cool. Okay, so here's for an Epson home cinema 5050 UB. You know, this projector itself has a HD, so it's 1920 by 1080 LCD. The way the light goes out, it's 2600 lumens and 2.1 to 1 aspect ratio. That's what this number is here. So for every 2 feet, it's like more of a long throw lens. For every 2.1 feet, you're going to get 1 foot of image. Right? Yep. So if you say your throw distance, so how far you are away from your projector is from its surface. Oh, they made it cooler. That's awesome. I haven't been here in a while. So you can like drag your little projector thing. At 76 feet, your image size is going to be 420 inches. Right? And then you can drag it closer and it can show you, you know, at 1 foot 4 inches, your image size is going to be 13 inches. It also, sometimes it used to have like a little thing at the bottom, but now it doesn't. And this gain here is your brightness, right? So like how bright your surface is. This is screen gain 1 is like white surface, reflective. But if you go, press this button, 0.5, can you do that? There. And how light it is in the room at the same time. So your ambient light kind of takes into account, you know, how bright your image is going to be. So this also brings into the equation, if you're in a theater, I use theater a lot because it's like a controlled environment. And like lots of times we don't have that controlled environment, but at least you can start with the controlled environment first. And the controlled environment, you have a lighting designer who's also working with you perceivably. And it's always a balance between the lighting designer and the media designer as to what we're going to see. If you have a really weak projector, you're going to have to ask your lighting designer, tone it down so that we can actually see what we, you know, you can control the light. They have more power in their luminosity than sometimes we do in our projectors. Sometimes like if your projector doesn't have a shutter and you go black, this is black. Let's see if we can see it on the camera. Yeah, I don't know. You probably can't see that. If we go black in, let me see. Can you see? Yes, you can. You see that like little kind of weird square around? It's really hard to see it. That's black. I've shut off my projector, not shut it off, but it's projecting a black box. My lighting designers really get annoyed with this black box. So on my, you know, more expensive projectors, you have a shutter that actually has like a physical thing that goes in front of the lens. So it blocks the light, no light gets out. And then you open the shutter and you have, you know, your image. The cheaper projectors do not have that shutter, unfortunately. And we've made multiple like little flap things. It's usually the lighting designer who always help me out with this. We have like a piece of fabric on a string, and you put it like probably on the grid in front of your projector, and there's a piece of string that actually when you pull, the thing goes up like that, and then when you let go, it goes down like that. So a mechanical shutter made of either black wrap or a piece of cardboard can work wonders and get rid of that annoying black outline square when we need the like absolute blackout in the show. Yeah. Does that make sense? Any questions about any of that? Because it's just like down this rabbit hole of like projectors, like why do I have 7 of them? Because they're each useful for different purposes, depending on the theater I'm in. And sometimes none of them are useful because of where did he go? Just like popped away. Where, you know, your projector can be hung and where your surface is. We can even look at, where is Riley? He just kind of popped out. Wonder what happened. Oh, there, he's coming back.
Weird, kicked me off. I don't know.
It just kicked you out?
Yeah, Zoom just randomly like completely disappeared.
That's weird.
Welcome back.
Yeah, hey.
I know. We're like, hey. Yeah. So I'm going to show you, I think I want to show a couple of examples. I just thought of one now. I should have showed you. Broadway. This is 1984. No, we want the recent one. 2013. It was this production of Sunday in the Park with George got like the 2000, I can't remember, a couple of years ago, Best Projection Design Award. And they used a total, I think, of 7 projectors for this. And the reason why they needed 7 and not just 1 is because they had to control each aspect of the show from different angles. And I can't find it. That's so bizarre because it usually comes up first. But I show this to the kids, like when I teach kids this stuff, they seem to like this. And theater people love this too. 1980, not 1984. I want like 2013. Let me try one more time. Is this it? These are pictures. This one. We can turn out the advertisements. Okay. No, this is not the one. I wish I could see it. I could find it. This is just another, this one. Okay, cool. You see that? Is it small or big?
The video,
Yeah.
it's like a little small, but I can see it.
Let's make it a little bigger. We could probably do full screen and then it's better. So back a little bit. Let's play. And of course, they're just going to chop up everything. But this was made, it had got the best. This is like one of my favorite parts, but hopefully they, you know, the whole set was basically a moving canvas and they used the projection to kind of fill in that canvas. And, you know, it was white. And that's, I think in this case, effective. I have this in front. Design element, and because it was conscious, because the floor was white, the background was white, the walls were white, so that the contrast of the figures in front of it did have that. Yeah, so here's a scrim. Here's an actor behind the scrim. the projection is on the scrim, and we can see both things at the same time. So it's like blending your eyes kind of, because it's blended, you don't have to jump back and forth between projected image and actor. We have both of them combined into one frame of focus. So
what do you think they're using for that front scrim?
probably some gray scrim material of some sort. It looks like the light is also bouncing off a little bit, which is a little distracting. And I can, you know, having to use scrim before, and it is hard sometimes because of your proximity of the actor or the dancer to the scrim to control the light, because light is like a cone, and not have the light bounce off the scrim, right? So like ideally the scrim would be away from your actor so that you wouldn't interfere with the projection with like some weird light that kind of gets through it.
Oh,
Yeah, I like this part. It's like, hey, look, and they positioned it. And I don't know how, you know, they have probably marks on the stage and like, this is where the dog's going to be. Put the thing down. You know.
And you think that they used one projector for each angle and then just mapped where they needed to in order to make it smaller there? Or do you think that there's a specific, or like,
I think they mapped it. I think there are angles or areas, most likely, that, you know, if you did one big projector from the front, you're going to get a hell of a lot of shadows if someone's in front of that, right? So probably for the background, they had some, let me see this guy. I can barely see a shadow for him. So they're probably really short throw projectors somewhere around there. In very rare cases, you have the option of like a rear projection, but that would be based off of like your theater and how much space you have behind your psych or whatever, right? So, and also you can reduce the amount of shadow by adding light. Like your lighting designer can be your friend in this sense, whereas sometimes I think some of the light, the gobos and stuff that are hitting the actors is masking the projection that's probably on those actors as well.
right?
You know, I've done a really cool, it was like a troubleshooting thing where I had something similar to this. I was doing Alice in Wonderland for a dance school up in New Hampshire. And I had this big black backdrop for the Queen of Hearts. It was like a garden scene, and she was up on a throne, but she was right up against the scrim. And if I threw the garden screen like scene on, it would be on her, and she would look like green, and it was just horrible. So what I did was I took like a circle, I colored it the color of the light that was on stage, and I placed that little circle where she was sitting. So then it didn't have this kind of wash, you know, thank God she was, you know, in a seat that was static. She didn't move. So then I had this like little colored dot that kind of washed out the rest of the projection and didn't look weird. You know. But that, I mean, this is really cool. And I think they kind of, this production prided themselves that they only use 7 projectors. We're like, only? Like, yeah, only. Yeah, so this is also a cool part where they incorporated the actors via projection, you know, into the scenes as well. I also want to show this other thing. Let me see. Find this other thing. This one, and I think Caitlin, you saw this before because I showed the other group this, but this is dance, and I think this is pretty cool. Whereas like you couldn't, I mean, I wouldn't say you couldn't, but I think it would be difficult to do this with light, like just a standard light. So effectively, you know, using video or in this case, probably generative video to do this kind of effect is like works to your favor. And because, and this is where that design element of like the white thing, I think it works because the floor is also white. And the dancers stand out because they're in contrast to that white, right? So if you had a black floor and a white background, it might be, you know, distracting because you have that duality of like, here's the wall and here's the floor. But if you seamlessly integrate it, like it has a nice effect. It's really, really pixelated. Probably because I'm zooming at the same time. Hold on, let's see if I can get it up to snuff here. And here's a case, it's still white floor, still white backdrop, but the lights are brought down. Can you see that, by the way?
It's pretty dark, but I can see pink moving around.
Okay. Yeah, it's super dark. Not the best, but that's, you know. Dancing, dancing, dancing. All right, I'm gonna stop sharing for a second. I think that was a lot. Any questions or thoughts that I might have bypassed a bit? Not really. Okay. I mean, I did bypass a lot, but just like basic. Yeah. So I want to go also into the role of a media designer in theater a little bit in terms of their role in relative to the team of theater artisans that make up a show, let's say in a traditional theater environment, right? So it does slightly differ depending on where you decide to do some art, you know, like, I don't know, but I think it's useful to know. So number one, if you're using a lot of video, your lighting designer should be your best friend. You know, because you're both controlling light and you're both controlling light in specific ways. And if both of you turn on full power at the same time, you're going to watch each other out. So being in communication with your lighting designer is very important. Even, you know, before you get into the theater. So then they have an idea of where everything is, where your surfaces are, what you're going to do with those surfaces, and where to place their instruments so that those two things don't conflict. Like I said, with the, you can have a standard setup of like scrim in the front and a black background in the back. So you have black and black, right? So scrim in the front, black background in the back, and your projector is coming from this way through the scrim. So what the nice thing about this is when it comes through the scrim, by the time it gets to the back wall, it diffused so much you can't see it on the back wall, so you don't have this double image. You just have the thing in the front, and then you have the performer or whatever object in the middle that you can play with focus of like who gets attention, right? Or you can do both get attention at the same time without having to worry about the black background because the light is already absorbed and we can't see anything. In doing that, say, like I did it, one of the first explorations I did the dance complex, and I actually hung a scrim in the dance complex. Don't ask me how that happened. I think there was a wire involved, and I think we had to tether it to the window. I have no idea, but it happened. And my lighting designer at the time had to finagle with black wrap a shutter for the downstage light trees, because what was happening, it was just spilling onto the scrim because of its proximity to that scrim. So it really we had to keep it back away. There needed to be about that much distance at least between the performer and the scrim itself, because if the performer went this way, they'd be in the dark because there's no light there. So they had to stay in the light away from the scrim in order to be seen. And that was a negotiation between the projection designer and the lighting designer. And then we had to tell the performers, don't go any far downstage than this. And we gave them a hard cutoff, like that's it, that's all you get. And, there's that. If you're incorporating audio that is, trying to be synced up, like there was a show we did with Wendy Jalen, Conferences of the Birds. And there was an audio designer who used Ableton Live based off of what the performers were doing. And the projection design was based off of what, the timing of the performers as well. And sometimes we let the audio designer get the trigger to trigger the next scene. Like I didn't do anything. I just sat back, they pressed the button, it transitioned, and it was like really integrated that way. So it like seamlessly like synced up in terms of time. So, you're really working as a team in productions like this, where things are, interacting with each other, whether it be video or audio or both in performance at the same time. And then there's also this other aspect of, if you're using, it's media designers are just heavy on the video, right? So it's heavy video stuff, and you need to rig stuff up. There are multiple roles within the media design world that you have to coordinate with, depending on the scope and the size and the scale of the production. Like you might have to get a projectionist to rig your projector, make sure the cables are tested, make sure they work, run the cables back to the booth, finally get your final out. That's not always the same job as the person who's operating the projection itself, right? Sometimes there's no distinction, and some directors are like, yeah, you do projection, go. And you're like, no, that's 3 jobs. That's not 1 job. That's 3, because I need some guy to guy is so not PC, person, because it could be a woman too, but I should say guy as a general, a person to, rig the mount that goes up in the grid to get the projector to work. And then I have to run the cables back to the booth. So I have that output that I stick into the computer or device, but most of the time it's a computer, so that I can send the signal out to the projector. And we have to make sure that the focus is all right, and where it's positioned is all right, and everything else. And that could take some bit of time. In experience, like I did it myself, it took a week to rig 3 projectors in the ceiling and focus them and make sure that the blended was fine, because you have 3 projectors overlapping at certain times, so you have to make sure those overlaps are like nice and straight. And that was just like physically like doing that and locking the positions of each projector. And then we can go into mapping. So you first do the actual mechanics of like the physical object first, make sure it's as much perfect as possible. then you go into like from the computer, fine tuning those things, making sure the focus is good and all the rest of it. But working with that team is essential because most of the time, I say 50-50 sometimes, depending on the show, you're getting cued up from your stage manager, right? So the stage manager needs to know your cues unless you take it by yourself and you press go and there's a visual or whatever. But being part of that team, you know, sooner rather than later is always optimal. It's like, don't bring in projection the last minute. Please don't do that. That gives everybody a headache, and it's just, yeah, doesn't always work out well because you think it's just like putting the projector and pressing play. Like, no, like let's try to avoid that part. So that brings me to the other thing, not in roles. It's that if you think you're going to use media, you know, video, whatever, into your process, incorporate that person that's doing that thing as soon as you possibly can. Because then you can work out like the actual conscious decisions of, oh, well, what would happen if we can do this or that? And we're not just flooding the stage with light and hoping that it works. You know, like we're going to consciously build the production, you know, from, you know, people working in the studio, having the projector, the media designer come, look at what's going on. Maybe they have to make content. That's a whole other world we didn't even really go into yet, like designing content, what kind of elements that is. Those are, and then incorporating it into the show. So they're as important as lighting designer, but maybe even brought in before that, probably around the same time as like the set design, if you have a set, you know, or your person who's doing the audio for it, probably around that same time would be good to start having conversations. Yeah, that's a lot of me rambling. Do we have any questions about that process or thoughts or experiences yourself of like when something worked and when it didn't in this regard? Yeah. Okay.
No, how so say I have like a fairly large warehousey type space that I'm going to be making something in. Like, what's like in terms of like buying my own projector? I mean, I have one, but like, what's like a good like standard like affordable, like I can't spend like $10,000 on a projector as much as I would love to. Like it's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
You know what I mean? Like what's like a, I don't know, like a basic
intermediary, like something that you
know,
use versatile. Yeah.
Solid. Like I have one and I hope I got the right one. I didn't even think about like the ratio thing, so I don't know if it's the right one, but like I want to be able to use it in like large spaces where I can have a very large screen. And then also like I'm hoping to try some things outside this summer. And so I don't know. I mean, I guess I feel like I need to look at the projector. What is it? projectorcentral.com, which I didn't know about. Like a lot of my questions can probably be answered there, but is there like, you know, like a basic standard you could recommend?
Well, considering the sizes of spaces, right? So what is the range of space sizes that we are encountering as performing artists, right? Like the small and I don't even think about smallness because it's like, well, that's less of a challenge than when you think about largeness. When you start to go large and then you need short distance between the projector and the large surface, then you're running into like issues where you're like, whoa, my throw ratio needs to be really small. It needs to be like 0.5 to 1 or something like that. I've invested in 3 projectors that seem to pretty much be versatile in a lot of spaces. They're 3,000 lumens a piece, and their throw ratio is 0.7 or 0.8 to 1. So it's a short throw, relatively short throw projector. They were less expensive. The brand name that I bought because they were cheaper is BenQ. Those are pretty decent projectors to look at. Epsons are also good, but they tend to be more expensive, and they tend to be more, I mean, the ones that you see in like Best Buy or whatever are more for home theater use. And they're usually 1-to-1 standard throw ratios, which in my experience is like, remember when we said when we have something close, right? We have a really bright image, and then we get farther and it gets more dim. So if you have a projector that is not as strong, you're advantaged when you get a short throw projector because you're closer to the surface itself. So you're going to see a brighter image. You're not going to lose so much light.
Can you say that again? Say that again.
Yeah. So a short throw projector is advantageous.
Yeah.
Because at a shorter distance, you're going to get a larger image.
Yeah.
Right. It also means at a shorter distance, we're going to have a brighter image.
Right.
Because it's not, the light's not diffused yet. It like hits the surface. If you get a standard throw one, you're going to have a less luminous image.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because you're at the size that you want. Like, I want the size of the wall. Well, for this wall, I could be here with a short throw, but for standard throw, I have to be over there. And over there, it's going to look less bright than if I'm here.
Right.
Right, and then you could just put it like in the grid itself.
Yeah.
You're going to have to be so far away.
Depending on the theater, because I tried to do this at a theater once where it was at Walnut Hill actually, and I was doing a student concert, a piece for the students. I was like, oh yeah, can I just put the projector up there? And they're like, no. And I was like, why? And they were like, well, because we can't run any Ethernet cable back to the booth. I was like, oh yeah, shoot. Well, that's a limitation. I was like, where are you going to operate from? Right? You're going to operate it from the stage? Ooh, that's hard because you can't see. And that brings up a whole other can of worms. In that, like, when you have a theater, they might, like, say the ICA, right? They already have a rig. You're not installing anything. Yes, you can install things. It just takes longer time. But they already have a standard projector in the back, and it's throwing to the back wall, and that's what it's focused for. You can use it to your advantage, to your advantage in figuring out, like, how can I use this? Or if you need something special, you need to bring something else in, and then now you're having to run cable. And now you have to run cable in all the distance it is between there and their booth. And are they going to let you lay that cable down? Sometimes not. Sometimes you have to use what they have in the theater. Depends on that.
Have you experienced difficulties with like having longer cables? I know in the dance studio I've been working at with our like online Zoom classes, once we got cables longer than 35 feet, you can't see the video.
That was part of what I was going to discuss. I forgot about that completely. For HDMI cables?
I think it was HDMI. It was like once it hit a length of longer than 35 feet, you can't see the video.
Crazy. Weird.
Yeah, so that was like the distance limitation of like where you.
It's the digital signal limitation. So, and this this is why I have this box. Okay. This is my $1 million box because each one of these components costs a lot of money. No reason at all. I swear to God. So this is, you can't really see because I have weird light, but these are extenders. That's the other part. That's the other part. Here's an extender, right? So you have a transceiver and a local. So this is for USB extender. This one, I have up to 4 inputs here. So I can take my webcam and stick it in there. And then there's an Ethernet, I can't use that. Yeah, there's an Ethernet port. that you run the Ethernet the length of wherever you want. You can run it up to almost infinite amount of space. It's not gonna, the signal is not gonna die. And then it's received by the receiver and the Ethernet, and then output in the USB, and the USB goes to your computer. And then it, you know, takes in all those 4 inputs as inputs, like actual 4 distinctly inputs. This is for USB. For HDMI, and this is 2 years of headaches that I've come to this conclusion. So it's like, depending on the protocol of the HDMI, depending on the protocol of your computer out, I've come to the conclusion these are the best boxes to use. This is this one. SDI, yes. So you use these two boxes. This one is something called HDMI to SDI, right? So it takes the HDMI in and it runs through SDI cable. SDI cable is a standard cable for broadcast TV. It's also an analog cable. I'll go into the digital analog thing in a minute, but it's not gonna, you can run it 200 feet, nothing's gonna happen to it. Then it takes in, this is the SDI to HDMI, it converts it back. So the SDI goes in and then gives you an HDMI out. And then I'll explain also, like, so that would be between the computer and the projector, right? Computer sending out HDMI signal, goes to the SDI, runs the length of however long, SDI takes in, goes out HDMI, HDMI goes into here. Both of them are powered. So it takes a signal and actually like gives a little oomph to it. Powered extenders are preferable to non-powered extenders because over long lengths, you might need that signal boost to get there.
Can I ask a dumb question?
No, it's all good.
So I have used all of those cords. I don't really know what any of those cords are. Like, I don't know, like, I mean, I know what they are. I know what they do, of course, but like, can we just like talk about like,
Yes.
what is an HDMI cable? Like, what is that? What does HDMI stand for? What is it? You know, like,
Oh God, I can't remember, but I can tell you the difference.
yeah, just like the basic kind of cords that like I have like 1,000 cords around me at all times, but like, I don't really know what they, I don't really fully understand what they are.
All right, so all cables are based off of 2 categories: digital signals and analog signals. I will draw you a picture. No, wait, I won't draw you a picture. I will look it up because it's probably better than me drawing a picture. I will show you. And the reason why, hopefully they'll have a nice picture because usually they do. There we go. That's a nice picture. Okay, I will share screen. Okay. So we have the analog signal, which has, the way it's like a wave, right? So imagine, remember, maybe, yeah, you guys are, I don't know, Caitlin, I'm not sure. So your TV set, the old, bunny-eared antennas, right? They're finding the signal in the air and then translating it into your TV and you can see it, right? The old way of transmitting that signal is an analog signal, the way that your TV actually displays it. And if the signal's kind of interrupted, the picture that you get is kind of fuzzy, right? It'll go in and out. It'll go like fuzz and then clear and then fuzz and clear. And the analog signal, and that's why, because if you look at the analog signal, it was up and down. So say this is, a good signal. And if it's kind of bad, it kind of goes on a curve, right? Whereas a digital signal is more of a square shape. It either works or it doesn't. It's a 1 or a 0. So if you have a picture, you have a picture. If you have kind of a weak signal, it drops out completely because it has to choose 1 or 0, right?
And that's the flow of electricity?
It's the signal itself. There's electricity in the signal, but it's how strong that signal is.
And what is a signal?
I don't know if I have the wherewithal to actually explain that. It's data, right? But
So is it
data
kind of
represented.
a metaphor for all the stuff in the cord?
Yeah. So I don't even know if I have an analog cord in here because they're not. All the recent technology just makes it too complicated and everything's digital right now. Okay, Ethernet. Right. So stop share for a sec. Ethernet, analog. Right. So I wish my husband was here because he's much better at describing this than I am. You put a signal through here and it just goes. There's no resistance in this cable.
It's like water.
There's no, yeah, it's like water, like electricity, like water, right? So you put it in this cable, it just goes. It's fine, right? It's going to go to the end and it doesn't need any more electricity to pass the signal through this cord. If you do the same with the USB, it needs power in order for the signal to go through it. And the power is kind of like shoots and then it goes down, right? So after, here's the thing. I don't know if I can show it because it's actually connected to the camera I'm using. This is a USB extender, right? You would think that this would help you get the length you want for your USB camera, but it only gives me 15 feet. I can maybe daisy chain 2 of these to get 30 feet, but my signal is probably going to drop out at that point. I would not use this for a show. Would not use this for a show. I would use the other thing that I told you, because you're taking your digital signal and you're putting it through an analog run of the cable so that the signal received on the other end is gonna be there. When you're using a digital cable, it's gonna meet resistance in the cable because of power, and the signal most likely is gonna drop out. Or like I had once, you can buy HDMI cables that are 100 feet long. I hate them. I was again in the dance complex. The lighting, they have an old lighting system, so the cables for the lighting system, you know, they have a lot of what do you call? They're not insulated well. So the electrical signal kind of like goes around the cable. If you're near the cable, there's actually electrical impulses around this cable. If you lay down your HDMI cable on top of that lighting cable, right, and it's not on, your HDMI seems to work fine. You stick on the lights, out. You don't have a signal at all.
Why?
On. Because of electrical interference. And that's why.
That's with the analog.
That's with digital.
That's with digital. Oh.
Yeah, if you have an analog cable, nothing happens.
Why?
It's more solid.
Why?
Because the electrical interference does not interfere with the signal going through. Right. So that's why, like, if you're in a theater, don't buy 100-foot long HDMI cable to do your run. Use SDI, or you can use Ethernet. I have some extenders that are Ethernet driven. They didn't work for me as much as the SDI did, just because of the nature of the computer I was sending it from. It has to do with like some protocol that passes the signal from the box to the other thing that I had attached, and it didn't work. So the SDI was cleaner.
What are digital cords and what are analog cords?
So everything we use right now, most of the time, is a digital cord.
Like what?
HDMI. Anything you can put into your computer. So HDMI, USB, Thunderbolt, whatever's, you know, any port you have on the side here, wherever you have your ports, those are most of the time digital signals. The only thing that's not is your Ethernet. And that's just to give you internet. Right. But the old, you know, yellow, where's that box? These ones,
Yeah.
those are all analog.
Okay.
So it's unfortunate that a lot of devices have phased out all the analog signals because it actually works to your advantage when you're dealing with distance and clean
Are digital signals just better? Are they faster or something? Like when they do work?
No, they carry data instead of signal. Like they carry ones or zeros.
Hmm.
Right. So it's also on or off,
Hmm.
which is they're analog signals have a resolution cap, and I can't remember the resolution cap on it, but they tend to have a resolution cap of a certain, depending on the cable, but
There's only like a certain amount of signal it can handle.
no, it has to do with the resolution of the device itself.
Okay.
Uh,
And digital don't have that same cap?
mm-mm. I mean, to the point of like whatever technology has given us at this point, right? Like a 4K
Right.
resolution is a whole lot of data that's being passed back and forth. Yeah. I mean, what else to say about that? It's just, and that's why I feel like a lot of my money has been spent on that box of converting signals. It's not even on the device itself. It's more on those little doodads that take it from this to make it this, so then you can plug it into that to make that work. And having a lot of them, helps sometimes when you're doing different types of projects, because every project sometimes is different, unless your rig is the same the whole time. But in my experience, it's never the same. It's always something different in the chain, and you have to plug something else into something else to make it work. So I'm not sure if that like encompasses all of that, but it's definitely a start of like doing long runs in theaters is much different than doing a short run in your kitchen because of distance and converters and all the rest of it. And there was something, that was the other thing I was going to go into, but I'll just use this as an example. So like if you had, if you wanted to use a camera, like a nicer camera than a webcam. It's in here somewhere. There it is. So a nicer camera than a webcam. So I have this. This is my Sony A6000. It's like a cool camera. I think Riley, I showed you this camera. This is like my favorite because it's a mirrorless, so it's like a DSLR in a way, and captures much nice, clean image. Now, in order for this camera, because all it has in the side, probably can't see that. Maybe you can if it adjusts, is an HDMI out and multi USB thingy. Pretty sure it's USB. So to get an HDMI from here and get it into this computer, you have to use something like this. That same thing I keep on bringing up. This is a capture, it's a capture device, and it converts through this one, HDMI, right? And then it goes out via USB. In this case, it's USB. In other cases, it could be Thunderbolt or USB-C or whatever else, so your computer can understand the signal. Because you can't, I'm not saying can't, because I think there are some DSLRs that you can do this where they convert it internally or something that it handles that, but a lot of them need the extra device in between to convert the signal from the HDMI out to the USB in, versus it just being like a webcam, which is just, it's inherently USB, but it gives you a lower quality picture. But it could be fine for other uses. I have no judgment on it. Use USB cameras for a lot of things that are quick and easy and dirty, and you just like stick it in and you know it works and it's great. But if you want a cleaner image, you want something better quality where you can fine tune the ISO and all the rest of it, you can use a DSLR. You just have to convert that signal to a USB or something useful for your computer to understand it. And that's another device that you have to put in the chain of devices. to make it understandable, basically. So that was that component of cameras. Whereas before, right, like if you think of 1990s, you can take your regular, you can take your regular like camcorder and you can just plug it into a projector directly. That was the beauty of the analog signal. It's like the beauty of just taking the camcorder. I don't know if you, I did this when I was a kid. You had your camcorder and you had the yellow and white and red cables and you stick it in the TV and you're like, look, feedback, this is amazing, right? Like it was really fun. And now it's so fucking complicated, excuse my language, I'm being recorded, to do that same thing with all of the digital signals that we have right now. Because we're dealing with data and not just signal, like straight signal itself. So if you can get your hands on like an old camera, some projectors still have the 3 AV cables in the back. You can just like go around like play with that. And that's super useful to understand like those 2 components without putting this component in the middle of it. So any questions about that? I know that was a little tangential, but I think useful. I wanted to show you as a fun thing. Let me just show you. Not here, here. Some examples. And I kind of wanted to go back in history a little bit just to kind of pay reverence to the forefathers of video art scene. This is Namjoon and Merce Cunningham. Just for like coolness, things were happening in the 70s. With analog signals, not. I mean, here.
Is there one more question in the other room? Merce Cunningham mentioned occupying time. On the other hand, one often hears the expression, I'm going to kill some time. It's a silly question, but can one kill time?
Yes, why not? Yes.
John Keg says it's called spring fever.
I don't know anything about killing time. It seems to me that it's the other way around. I'd just like to say one thing that is extraordinary to see. I've been watching a lot of video in our studio because we have some machines and we've made some video pieces, and there's a thing when you...
bad is your shack? Find out which How bad is your shack?
On Christmas Day, Mother said, I've listened to your record several times. After hearing all those stories about your childhood, I keep asking myself, where was it that I failed?
He comes back on Wednesday for 3 days, and then he goes to Toronto, and then he goes all the way to California to meet us. Right. At the end of the month.
I may possibly do that too. I'm not sure.
Will you be in San Francisco?
Well, I may be in LA,
Uh-huh.
and then I could go anywhere.
Oh, that would be marvelous. Oh, well, I'll tell you what I'll do. We'll let you know where and when we are.
Yeah.
So in case you happen to be there, we can meet.
Okay, great.
Oh, that would be wonderful.
Well, why don't we try to have dinner one night when John is here?
We'll be in touch then. You'll be at Stony Point?
I'll either be there or here or
Somewhere.
New York.
Well, New York, someplace. All right. Okay.
One of
Okay.
those places.
Yes. And I hope everything is well out there.
Thank you very much.
Yes. Okay, Jeff.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
So, I mean, that's one kind of cool historical reference, I think, that is useful to know it exists. I mean, there are many explorations you can go look up on the internet. Like this one's, what's this one? Is this the one with? Okay, so do you guys know who Namjoon Pike is? No, Riley, a little bit, maybe.
Yeah, a little bit.
A little bit. So the father of video art. So I mean, I want to put this in context. This was made for the screen. A lot of his works were made for screen, but a lot of works weren't made for screen. But this, particular one is, and not meant to like be any other place of it. But barely make it out. But like basic video feedback stuff. It's not doing basic in art terms, but experimental in their terms. See, huh? Anyway, that some examples of
Those
things that
we have
happen.
available now, but like how did he? Those look like things that we have available like in editing software now. Like how was he doing that in the 70s?
Cables. mixers. I think there's like there's some photographs of him like in a room and there's like cables everywhere because that was his deal. Is like just take things apart, put it together in certain ways, see what happens. Don't be afraid to experiment, you know, and using the technology that was available, you know, that he went down the rabbit holes of like how things worked and putting all them together, created a legacy that we're still living in currently, right? So he actually was like one of those visionary people that as soon as the internet came to, I mean, he died in 1990, can't remember what the year was. He visioned the future that we're living in now then, because he said, whoa, internet, well, that means everybody can connect. That means like so many different things could happen. And kind of visioned all of the pop culture that we experience in this internet reality currently. Pretty cool. And someone to like just look at, just because. Well, also what I find is that we'll go back to the beginning of this whole thing when I explained that our eyes perceive color in red, green, and blue. That's the basis of all of this stuff that we're doing right now. It's just perceiving light, perceiving color. The technologies are representative of that. So whether or not it's analog or digital, it's still the same principles. You're not dealing with any other principles in there. You're space, time, color, light. What else? Movement, I guess, but that's space-time. So those are the things that are our clay. And just like now we just refine the clay so it's a little clearer. Like it's more clear now. Whereas before the resolution was not so great. But it's the same clay. They're playing with the same things. That's why like some of the stuff that he's done analog, we still do with our digital because they're the same principles. You know, we've added to it the three-dimensional space, which we haven't gone into yet, but it's, you know, that's why I gravitate towards that old style too. I mean, that aesthetic, I just like it. I don't know, it's a choice. Mm-hmm. Yeah. So,
Callie, I think I have to run. But thank you so much for this.
yeah, thank you guys. I'm so happy to have both of you here. Like the two people that I would really want here right now. Like they're here. That's awesome.
I'm stoked to be here. Riley, your cats are hilarious. So cute.
My sister, I'm babysitting my sister's cat for the weekend, and he's like less than a year old.
That's why.
He's like 12. He's like, I don't know what the hell's going on here this weekend. So.
Awesome. So I will stop the recording now, and I hope that you guys will join us for the next session next week, same time, same channel.
Definitely.
Thank you so much for doing this.